you considered the messages your outfits send? What do you think your clothes say about you? See, style is about the clothes, but it's not really about the clothes. Every day you make choices about what you're going to wear, but what are you communicating? Welcome to Above and Beyond Style. I'm your host, Maria DiLorenzo, and in 2019, I founded MFD Style, where I provide a unique, intuitive approach to personal styling for those ready to embrace a more meaningful look. With this podcast, I'll uncover key elements of where spirituality, psychology, and style intersect, revealing how you can make intentional wardrobe choices that reflect who you really are. So let me ask you, are you ready to transform into your authentic self? Then it's time. Come with me on this journey, and together we'll take your style above and beyond style. Hi everyone, welcome back to Above and Beyond Style. So this week I wanted to talk about a topic that I actually have been in conversation with many stylists, and if you follow me on Instagram, I talk about this a bit, but around sustainability. And I was really fortunate to connect with a fellow stylist here in the Boston area who also has a podcast called The Wardrobe Muse. And my stylist friend Lisa and I had a great conversation about sustainability and style and the ways that it impacts not just our environment and our culture, but we as people and how we operate in and around our wardrobe choices. So I thought I would also do an episode on this topic because it is sort of an important part of my business model, and one that I weave into it where I can and how I can, and the ways that feel the most responsible and reasonable for me to be able to help people with. So I kind of wanted to give you a little framework about why this matters and where I think I've been able to make some intentional efforts to promote a more sustainable agenda around style and some of our wardrobe choices. So, I think it's difficult to really talk about this without looking at the context of living in the United States, and we are a capitalistic society where consumerism drives our economy and our culture. And I won't debate the pros and cons of that with you today, but it's a component of our lifestyle. And the idea around consumption, I think, has been one that has really started to hit more of the mainstream sort of consciousness, because I think people are starting to imagine and realize either one, how much we own and how much we have, and recognizing that it feels like a lot in comparison to many other places across the globe. And when we take that time to be able to really look at, what do I own? What is this about? And how are these things, these physical things, serving me? I think it gives us reason to pause and to really take a look at some of our consumption behaviors and how we might be able to contribute to a more sustainable effort, particularly around clothing and the fashion industry. And I won't take too much of your time today really digging into all of the complexity around the fashion industry, because there's a lot there. And the reality is that consumer waste with wardrobe and clothing is extraordinarily high. And I think it's one of those things that if you haven't really dug into it, I would encourage you to take some time to explore and read and understand some of the challenges around where clothes go once we have, parted ways with them, whether we're throwing them in the garbage or even if we admittedly are donating them and are trying to kind of get them back into circulation, but perhaps they're not making it back into circulation and are in fact landing in landfills, which are consuming more and more of this physical landscape. If you haven't, I would encourage you to watch, it was on Netflix, and I don't know what it's streaming on now, but it's called The True Cost, and it's a documentary all about sort of the fashion industry and looking at some of the underbelly, really, of how some of these choices around consumption really kind of don't ever go away. For as much as we like to believe that our choices are good and we're, intentions are well made, and I'm not questioning that on anyone's level, but just to kind of recognize the larger impact that goes into consumption, particularly around clothing. And so when I had my eyes sort of opened to the realities of the volume of clothing and apparel that is in landfills, it made me really think about the impact on our planet and sort of what that's doing, not just to our physical landscape, but to clothes that are not breaking down, and sort of how that impacts our atmosphere and many, many other indications and challenges that come out of that I'm certainly not qualified to speak on, but help me realize that there is a bigger story going on here. So when I talk about clothing, and as a wardrobe stylist, there is a certain level of responsibility that I feel to be able to keep these questions and these realities part of the work that I do. So that's sort of why it matters to me, that I don't want to go around ignorant or naive about the realities. And also I feel it important to be able to educate and to try to enlighten some of my clients around some of these topics, not with an agenda particularly to change behavior, because that is an individualized decision. But I do feel it's important to talk about some of the ways that I work a sustainable effort into my own business model that help me feel like I'm staying connected to my true purpose, but also help me, reflect back on some of these realities that are, very common these days. So one of the things that I think is difficult for people to sort of grasp when they think about how do I be a more sustainable shopper, or how do I embrace a style that is more sustainable. And I think at the end of the day, it really goes around and really centers around how you spend your money. And that's probably an uncomfortable question or topic for a lot of folks. And I'm, again, not here to judge about your decision making around how you spend your money, but I want you to think about some of the impact of how your decision can influence the way that this whole trajectory can go. So I think for a long time, many of us believed that the quick, easy fixes around fast fashion was the way to go. And fast fashion and I don't really want to call out particular brands or names, because that to me doesn't feel like the most important part of this message. It's just that we know that there are brands in the consumer market that are putting out clothing at a rapid speed, at a very low cost, especially looking at the cost they pay their wage earners to be able to produce and manufacture the clothing. And where does all that clothing go? Because as you know, fashion, the industry is always cycling new. There's always a new season, a new style, a new trend. And so the clothes that sort of stay in the market and active in the market are only there for a period of time, and then they're definitely moving out. And the question always in my mind is like, where do they go? Where do all of these clothes, these mass-produced items at a very low cost, like where do they end up? And I think that's the larger question that I want you to be asking yourself when you consume a product or decide to purchase a piece of clothing, about one, how long will it withstand the test of time? And two, recognizing the impact and your contribution in that cycle. So one of the things that I really try to help educate some of my clients around is about the cost of your clothing, and recognizing that no, it doesn't necessarily mean that you pay more, you get a better product. In a perfect world, I think that would be the logical kind of connection. And that isn't always the case. I think it really has to do more about, one, looking at the garment composition and recognizing that more sustainable fibers and fabrics can withstand the test of time. And so by purchasing something that has a natural fiber, which is composed primarily of a natural fiber, that is, it's going to last longer. Then it's going to stay in your closet longer. And then ultimately it's going to get put into use longer, as opposed to being discarded, donated, tossed, whatever it ends up being. So we'll talk about garment composition here in a little bit, but the idea around cheap clothes, just to cycle in and out, and I think the volume with which that happens, particularly in the United States, is pretty outstanding. And I think one of the things that we can do to try to counteract that is to really pay attention to brands that are perhaps at a higher price point, admittedly, creating garments that are of much higher quality, that their construction and their design have more withstanding power, that they're able to hold that test of time, as I was talking about, because of the way that they're constructed and the fabrics that they're using. And recognizing that the higher quality item that we purchase, the more likely it is that it will stay in our closet and that it perhaps will be able to stay in circulation within our own wardrobes. So a great example for me is I discovered a couple years ago a brand out of New York. It's a female-owned brand called Classic 6. And if you followed me on any social media, I'm sure you've heard me talk about Classic 6. But it is a really extremely fascinating brand because the designer and the founder started with 6 original designs, 6 pieces of clothing in her whole design and catalog of clothing. And they're impeccable of quality and design. They are of a higher price point, but I wouldn't say they are so astronomical that it puts people out of touch with being able to access them. So I'm not suggesting, and I really want to be conscious of different people's levels of the ability to purchase at different price points. But the reality is you might pay more, but you're getting such a better product. And in that, the transparency around, one, how they're made, 2, the design process, the thoughtfulness with which these pieces were created to withstand time, to me feels like a standalone in this sort of space of sustainable style. And the beauty of her design, and we're going to talk more in a minute here about capsule wardrobes, is that her designs actually are created so that they can be mixed and matched within their own collection for innumerable combinations that I think create, I forget how many you could probably, price out there for the number of items that she has. But I think the important part to recognize about brands like Classic 6, who are trying to help us think about how can we create a wardrobe of quality pieces that are going to last, so that we're not transitioning clothing as quickly and as rapidly as we have perhaps if we might invest in a more fast fashion brand. The other space that is interesting in and around sustainable style is, I don't know if you follow anyone on social media or you know of anybody who does wardrobe tracking. And this can be a bit of a tedious process for anybody that's not really into details. This might not be the practice for you, but if you are detail oriented, this is an interesting approach to being able to look at your wardrobe and have an idea around, well, how much am I actually wearing the clothes that I have? And I've seen people do this in a bunch of different ways, as simple as just pen and paper, and they're literally just writing down every piece of clothing that they own and tracking with little, track marks, how often and when they wear them, making note of that on the piece of paper. And then over the course of, several months or a year, you get to look at, wow, I wore that shirt 30 times over the course of this year. That feels like a total winner in my wardrobe, and one that obviously you're attracted to and is sort of withstanding that desire to stay. So the wardrobe tracking process also has been growing, I think, in the consciousness of a lot of people, especially those that are practicing more minimalist behaviors and really wanting to get down to sort of the core pieces of the clothes that they wear and really identifying what are those items that, deserve to stay in my closet because I'm wearing them all the time. The other little trick I'll mention that I've seen people do to track wears, or at least track if you've worn it at all, is just to, if you have a hanger where the top of the hanger turns, to turn your hanger around, right? So your hanger typically goes one direction on the rack. And so the idea is to start with them all turned the opposite direction. And so when you wear an item, then you flip it so that the hanger is hanging in the opposite direction than it was. And that indicates to you that you've worn it. So the idea there is that you get to see the physical items that are either getting traction in your wardrobe or you're actually wearing, and noticing the ones that you haven't reached for. And so then you have an opportunity to really pay attention to, are those items ones that you should keep and hang on to. So this cataloging of your wardrobe seems to be a really interesting practice when we talk about sustainable style, because it helps us, again, create some awareness around what are the things in our closet that we're wearing that are really, they're composed of a particular fabric, perhaps that can withstand the test of time. And you get to notice some of those trends in your own behavior, which I think is kind of cool if you have an interest in those types of things. The other tool that I'll mention is if you are interested in cataloging your wardrobe and maybe you're a bit more tech savvy, there is an app called Cladwell, Cladwell. And the Cladwell app is an incredibly cool new technology that I'm excited. I hope to get to connect with them and work with them a bit more. But what it does is it allows you to catalog your wardrobe. And in some instances, you might be able to find the exact item online and populate the app with the picture of the item that you own. Or you find an item within their own catalog that looks similar to the item that you own. And so you're essentially building your wardrobe within the application. And the really cool part of this app, it does lots of different features, but one, it will help track the number of wears that you have for any particular piece. You have the ability to create combinations of outfits and sort of design and put them together and make notes to yourself around oh, this outfit really worked, here's why, and give you that tool. It's almost like your own magazine that you can literally flip through to look at various combinations that really worked and that you'd be excited to wear again, and help kind of trigger in your own memory about, why you liked them and why they were fun. Cladwell's also currently creating a beta test of stylists like myself who are able to use the application with their clients and style them through the app. So if you and I are working together and we use the Cladwell app, I can send you outfit combinations through the app with my own notes and commentary and suggestions about wear it this way with style ideas, etc. And so you kind of have your own cue, if you will, from a stylist to be able to, look at your wardrobe and create new combinations through it. So I love this idea from Cladwell because, again, it's helping you look at your own closet with a new set of eyes, as opposed to looking externally and trying to find new items that perhaps may or may not work with your existing wardrobe, and maybe even confuse you further because those items may not go with the items that you currently have, or maybe they don't fit in quite as seamlessly as some of the things that you have. So it kind of creates this mindset of, let me create and play within my existing wardrobe. And this is one of the key takeaways. I'm going to talk about a few takeaways for you around how to create more sustainable style. Shopping your closet is going to be one of them. And I mentioned earlier about capsule wardrobes, and I could give you an entire episode on this topic, and perhaps I will, but I'll just say this about capsule wardrobe. So for any of you that aren't familiar with the term or the concept, it's a curated number of pieces of clothing in your wardrobe that ideally can mix and match within each other for innumerable amounts of combinations, for you to be able to have a really focused wardrobe that is serving you for all different lifestyle purposes. A lot of people like to get caught up in the number of items that should be within a capsule wardrobe. So that could be highly debated, and I'm actually not even going to go down that road today. But I would say the real goal around a capsule is to help you simplify and to really mirror some of that minimalist lifestyle around, these are my core pieces that I love. Every piece fits me great. And ultimately, I want them to be able to mix and match pretty fluidly within the other pieces to be able to create a really comprehensive wardrobe. And this is an incredibly effective technique to be able to utilize the items in your closet. And this harkens back to my point earlier about having pieces like from Classic 6 that are of this impeccable design and quality that you can mix and match so many different ways and can wear for years or decades, depending on how well that garment is constructed. So capsule wardrobes are a really fun way that I think people can conceptualize a more sustainable practice for themselves. And it's not the only, but it's certainly one that is a bit more trendy these days, and I think people have an interest in. So the idea around practicing more sustainable style, in my mind, really is the core belief that what you have is good, and that you don't necessarily need to seek elsewhere for more. And not to say that, picking up an item here or there, or that might round out or complete a wardrobe more comprehensively, isn't useful or needed at times. But most of us probably have more than we need. And there are ways that we can then sort of breathe new life into these wardrobes so that we're able to really use the things that we already own, as opposed to buying more, consuming more, and ultimately more landing somewhere like a landfill when we're ready to discard them. So you hear me talk a lot about shopping secondhand. And I think in this culture where perhaps you want something new, or there is a need for an item to really round out your closet or your wardrobe, or you just like to shop, no shame in that game. Shopping secondhand is it's like an untold secret that I don't know if more people are, I hope more people are picking up on it, because to me it feels like there are so many treasures out there in the secondhand world that are getting overlooked, or perhaps just are, kind of missing their day, because again, I've mentioned this in previous episodes that, so many people through the pandemic especially were going through their closets and getting rid of so many things, perhaps because of size changes or any number of other factors, that there's an incredible market right now for secondhand in either consignment shops or places like a Goodwill or a thrift store, where you can find practically brand new with tags sometimes to be able to get back into circulation. Now, I try really hard to be very intentional whenever I'm going to donate, to find a location that I believe is able to put the items that I'm donating into immediate use. So that often doesn't mean I'm giving to a Goodwill, because there's so much that is given to a place like Goodwill. And as you can imagine, a great number of those items don't make it back into the homes of other people and are often now landing in places like landfills. So I try to be super intentional, and hopefully this will inspire you too, to think about what are the areas in your own local neighborhood or community that might be able to put your items into immediate use. Personally, I've been able to connect with a couple women's shelters that are here in the Boston area, that I've built a relationship with the folks that run the shelter to say, can I bring a few items? I have to be really conscious that I'm not inundating them with things if they don't need items, but typically when I've brought things, they're able to get them in the hands of other women who can put them to use right away. And that to me feels like the biggest win if you're going to donate. So to do a little of the extra homework to find the place where those things can be put back into circulation quickly. And as I said, you've heard me talk about from the secondhand market, there's lots of different merchants online now that are doing this, whether that's ThredUP, Poshmark, TheRealReal. There's innumerable different places that you can shop secondhand items that are like incredible quality. So to me, that feels like an important factor of sustainable style, that if you're going to buy anything, try to buy it something that is secondhand that can be put back into use. The next sort of takeaway that I want to offer you is around being an outfit repeater. And this is the core kind of concept of the capsule wardrobe, is that there are plenty of times in our society where we might feel like we can't wear the same thing or even the same combination of things together, which I'm not quite sure where that stems from, but I want to give you the permission to be able to wear outfits again, even among that group of people that have seen you in it however many number of times, because the reality is the more wear you get out of your clothing, the less you're having to seek outside of that to wear. So being an outfit repeater is the number one, probably easiest technique around sustainable efforts for style. Now, you've also heard me talk about looking for natural fibers. And for me, this is an important concept around that difference between fast fashion and those brands that are really trying to have you purchase an item of a better quality and construction. If you don't already, I want you to make the practice of looking at the garment tag whenever you buy an item, or even the items that you currently own, and pay attention to the composition of the fabric and the fibers that are used for that particular garment. I really want to challenge and encourage you to really look for natural fibers like cotton, linen, wool, silk, those items with which are not processed, like a polyester or a rayon. And my goal always is to have the garment be constructed of at least 60% of that natural fiber. So if it's 60% cotton, that's a winner to me. Sometimes you'll see acrylic be the other. It's very common in sweaters where you'll see like a 60 cotton, a 40% acrylic. Not ideal. I try really hard not to buy acrylic personally, but it is at least a rule of thumb, a measurement that I can follow when I shop and look for things. I really try to be intentional about the fabric content and looking for those natural fibers. The last techniques or strategy I'll offer you around sustainable style is really around paying attention to your own shopping habits. And I'm preaching to the choir here because I know all of us are intentional and are trying really hard to make our money go as far as it can and to be really good consumers. I believe that inherently about you as my audience listener. And while we're trying to really wear what we have, as I mentioned, about being an outfit repeater and really trying to pay attention to maybe those capsule wardrobe strategies, you might want to experiment with a no-buy month. And in fact, I'm actually doing one right now as I record this episode that for anybody who likes to shop or finds a lot of joy in shopping, it's really interesting when you can take a pause from it, because it allows you to pay attention to what you already own and really value the pieces that you have, and to be really grateful and aware of the fact that you have a choice around your buying power and what you buy. And having a little pause sometimes creates that awareness, and it also creates that intention around when you do buy something, it feels like you've sort of gone through your criteria and paid attention accordingly to how that's going to really work best for you and your lifestyle. So sustainable style really there's so many different lanes that this conversation can go down. And I've really only kind of touched on a few because for me, it's such an important factor in sort of how how I do wardrobe styling or how I work with the client. But it also is about the awareness of the impact of my choices. And again, as we think about, above and beyond style and really paying attention to the things that are more than just the clothes on our bodies, what else is happening by some of these choices that we're making, both on ourselves and our lifestyle, but also on other people, those that are perhaps manufacturing or creating our clothes, and the planet, and sort of how the planet itself is directly being impacted by some of these choices around our consumer behavior. So to me, this is a really, it's just important. It's just important to be aware of and to be conscious of. And I hope I've hopefully given you a few techniques or strategies, or even just concepts that maybe you can start to wrap your brain around as you perhaps go to embrace a more sustainable style. So thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening today. If you enjoyed what you've heard, I would appreciate you taking the time to leave a review on the podcasting platform you're using, and share this episode with others who you think might really enjoy these conversations about personal style. For more information all about MFD Style services, you can find me on the web at mfdstyle.com, on Instagram at mfd_style, where I post almost 5 days a week, or send me an email at maria@mfdstyle.com. I also have a weekly email I send to subscribers, so I will include the link to that sign up in the show notes. So until next time, friends, remember to love yourself and then love yourself some more.